All right, thank you everyone for joining me for today's Vocabulary Power Plus online demonstration and walkthrough. My name is Keith Bergstrom. I'm the president here at Prestwick House. I've been with the company for about 21 years now, and I'm just would love to give you a chance to take a look at our vocabulary online program. It is the first of our couple of digital programs that we've launched over the last couple of years to try to help bring the English language arts classroom into the online arena. I know there's a lot to be said on both directions as to whether what works well online and what doesn't. So kind of want to talk a little bit about what our goals were, what we were setting up, and how we got started on moving forward with creating an online version of our Vocabulary Power Plus program. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat. I'm don't have a second here to answer those questions along the line. So I will be taking a look at those at the end and hopefully be able to answer any of your questions as we come along. The meeting will start off with just a little bit of background information, and then I'll dive into walking you through so you can see the program. Anyone who is interested in the program afterwards, I'll be happy to create a login account for you. Just go ahead and drop your email accounts into the chat, and I'll create a demo login that you can go ahead and play with the program on your own. So before we get started too far into it, I want to kind of just talk a little bit about what Vocabulary Power Plus Online is. It is our 100% online version of our vocabulary program. Many of you may be familiar with Vocabulary Power Plus. The program's been around for about 15 years now in various formats, and we continually reimagine and rework with the program. But overall, we've helped over 1.5 million students improve their writing or test prep. Really, each of the different versions of the program has a slightly different approach. And this is actually the second version of our online program. Once upon a time, we had a direct digital version of our print program where everything was identical, and we really learned a lot about the way that students work in an online environment. So when we went ahead and we wanted to update this for a modern audience, we really wanted to make sure that it worked well for everyone. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the lessons we've learned and how we reimagined the program, and give you a little bit of an introduction to the program as we move forward. So the program is built to parallel the online book program, even though it doesn't have the exact same activities in it. It does have the same words. So some teachers do like to use the books and the online program in conjunction, where the online program can work as a regular practice with good independent feedback, and some of the additional materials like some of the deeper test prep writing passages, things like that that work in the print program are available in those. So while we're working on building this, we had a variety of different goals in mind, but the biggest one was that we know that teachers are busy and you don't have time to necessarily handhold every student as they go through this. So we wanted to have a really well-structured program that your students would work through independently, and then you could go ahead and assess them as you go along. So before we get started, just want to talk a little bit about why vocabulary study is important, because it is becoming more and more kind of that direct vocabulary instruction is becoming more and more popular in schools, primarily recently because of the increased focus on the science of reading. If you have been following any of the research things that have been going on, you know that the science of reading is not kind of a singular body of knowledge. It's not kind of one size fits all. It's a description of the entire body of research about what helps students become better readers. And one of the kind of core elements that you see regularly throughout the research is that vocabulary instruction, direct vocabulary instruction, is really important, because students who go ahead and get lost, don't have that sight vocabulary, have to look up words, really lose the ability to read fluently, and then they lose that motivation to read it all. So the ongoing direct study of vocabulary is linked as one of the kind of 5 core pillars of reading instruction while you go ahead and read it, but it's not only for reading materials. We know that it's important for effective and powerful writing. When you're writing, you can't just use the same 7 words along the way. You need to have variety. You need to build those up and really have options to choose from. And then vocabulary, once upon a time, was really rooted in the test prep universe. When I was I'll date myself a little bit. When I was a kid, the SAT was all analogies. That was the center of what vocabulary study went to, was just spending time working on analogies. But now really all types of major assessments, whether it's the SAT, ACT, or a variety of different tests from states, have direct and indirect vocabulary assignments. Sometimes you'll have questions within a reading passage. Sometimes you'll have them really directly asking you what the meaning of this word is in this passage. So your students need to have access to those vocabulary words in order to perform on the tests to the levels that you expect. So I mentioned that this is not our first try at an online program. It is kind of our most effective version in here. This is kind of our core lessons that we took when we put in here. The program must be focused and purposeful. As you guys know, if you're familiar with our print program, we really wanted to have a variety of ideas. That was the original plus in Vocabulary Power Plus. It was not just vocabulary, it was also test prep. But we found that when we put those different types of activities in front of students in an online setting, they felt like it was kind of messy. They would decide they didn't want to work on certain assignments. It didn't feel like they were working on a cohesive, coherent, ongoing lesson. So when we reworked the program, that was our first goal, was to go ahead and target that to a student. We also found that we couldn't do the things that we had previously learned, which was drop 15 vocabulary words in front of the students and ask them to go ahead and memorize them. We needed to break those down into small chunks and go ahead and work on those words directly. You can't just drop them in and say, go spend 20 minutes staring at a long list. We want to get them directly in front of the students and working quickly. We also know that teachers can't sit there and sit over every student's shoulders. We needed to have students to be able to work independently, whether you're working at this in class or working at as homework. When your students go through a set of assignments and they know exactly what they need to do on an ongoing basis, they're able to perform better and they're able to self-pace while they work through here. We also learned that students really need that real-time feedback. It can't be a type of thing where you click a button and a teacher goes ahead and reviews writing assignments later and gives them feedback later on. We know students need that feedback kind of like a game, kind of like an assessment where they really understand what they're working on. And along that line, we really knew that we needed to have a different types of assessments for students. You can't just have an assessment at the end that says, go ahead and grade this and don't grade this as you go along. We wanted to make sure that your students knew right off the bat, this is your test assignment, this is what we're working on. And your formative assessments are really designed for your students to work through repeatedly and learn. They're there as learning experiences, not as specific graded assignments. You can absolutely grade assignments, but we built the program around the idea that throughout most of the materials, your students can work on them over and over again so that they can go ahead and kind of lock these words in. And of course, it needs to be easy to implement. This is not the only thing you're using in your classroom. Once you go ahead and set the program up, you need to be able to dive right into it and work along the way. So I've mentioned our book programs a couple of different times. So just as a quick summary, this program has been available in a variety of different editions. The current edition that we have is called our Vocab Power Plus for College and Career Readiness. And in addition to the core vocabulary assessments that are mirrored within our online program, although they do have different approaches as you move through here. We have a variety of test prep activities, things like writing assignments, multiple choice grammar and usage questions, and critical reading passages. But I did want to let you guys know that this summer we're releasing a brand new edition of this book that has expanded reading assessments, a couple of new graphic organizer type activities called our Science of Reading edition that really focuses on those skills that I mentioned at the top of the presentation here, talking a little bit about vocabulary. So when I look at this program, you can see that there's a wide range of materials. We go ahead and we look at looping back on programs, looking at larger versions of word lists as you work along the way. But the online program has to have a very different approach. So what we did was we took the same word lists that appear in the book, regardless of the edition, whether you're working with some of our older classic or ACT, SAT materials, the current Common Core, or the brand new Vocabulary Power Plus for Science of Reading edition. Sorry, this brand new edition. They all have the same word lists in there. So we made sure that the program does work in that type of function. And if you are using these programs in conjunction, they will be identical. Many of the lessons are based on the kind of activities are based on working from the similar materials, but we rearrange them to follow those lessons that I talked about a little bit earlier, giving students direct feedback, making sure there are just single correct answers while they work through here. So we also wanted to make sure it was extremely well organized. So what we'll do next is dive into the program, but you'll see we have a series of activities of increasing rigor from Learn, where your students are just introduced to the words. They get the chance to learn the definitions. That's the chance for them to kind of encounter these words for the first time. Through practice activities, where they have kind of lower stakes, easier activities, working with kind of matching definitions, building connections with their word webs, and all the way up through more advanced activities such as apply and using and word use activities. And then they move on to an assessment at the end of each unit. So they're able to see an increasing difficulties you go through, and we'll walk through now each of the different types of activities. So I will pull up my demonstration page here. You guys will go ahead and get a copy of login of this. I see at least one user's put in their email address, so thanks for doing so. We'll get you a login shortly. You'll see every school gets their own space, so it does allow you to match your state's privacy standards. We go ahead and take privacy very seriously, especially for student information. The information appears only in the student login information, and we have basically no additional information stored, no direct connections with your platform, so you don't need to worry about personally identifiable information getting out into the universe. So when I log in, as my student, I'll see whichever class I'm organized in. This is my 9th grade class, so I'm going to dive into a lesson for Vocabulary Power Plus Level 9. You are able to organize your classes in any way that makes sense. You could put all your 9th graders into one class or break them down into, smaller units of groups. We go ahead and we try to be very flexible on that. I'm diving into a later lesson, but as I mentioned above, they're all the same. You've seen me have do this vote with this user a couple times, so I'm trying to use a new class. So, as mentioned, every lesson is broken down into 3 core segments before a quiz. These segments are focused on 5 vocabulary words, and they follow an ongoing pattern. First, you learn, practice, show, and apply what you're working on. Each of these will, of course, depend time-wise, will of course depend on the student, but is designed to be used in a portion of a classroom, maybe 15 minutes here for you to go through and do all of your different work, maybe a little bit more than that, depending on the student's pace as you go through. So we'll start off with a learn activity here. Here we see the 5 words that we are working on, and every word is introduced the same way. When you click the play button, you'll hear the word pronounced. You'll see the definition. Also hear that read out loud and the example sentences. Because of the way Zoom works, it suppresses the sound that comes from my computer, so you won't be able to hear it, but I'll kind of mimic the way it works, and of course you'll be able to try it when you go through here. So when you click this button, it says the word is mitigate, mitigate, mitigate. So you're able to hear it very slowly, quietly pronounced clearly from a variety of different editors that we've gone ahead or audio actors that we've hired to work through these. Then they hear the definition. Mitigate is a verb. It means to make less severe, to become milder. And then you get an example sentence. Gary put plywood over the windows to mitigate any damage that the hurricane might do to his house. So in just hearing the introduction, you've heard the word pronounced about 5 different times. You've seen the definition, you've heard it, you've been able to work in here. You're able to interact with this. Students, when they have just word lists, they tend to zone out a little bit in here. So by being able to click and hear the words in their headphones, they're able to kind of learn these words and move through them. So you'll see that repeated for each of our upcoming vocabulary words. I'll go ahead and get to the next activity. Then we move on to our next activity here, which is our practice. Practice focuses more on the definition, less on usage. So we open up with a drag and drop activity focused on matching the vocabulary words to the definitions they just encounter. This is the last time they'll focus specifically on the definitions. After that, we look at kind of ways to find the words in context and ways to get a little bit more familiar with the contextual meaning rather than just a pure denotative meaning here. So your students will be able to drag and drop correct answers and incorrect answers into the right place. And when they hit the submit button, they get immediate feedback. So they can see which ones they got wrong, and then they can rework it and try to do the activities again with the words in different places. Again, this is all designed to be formative rather than summative as an assessment. Your students are there to learn as they go through. So maybe they'll get a couple other words, continue to work on those to lock those definitions in. When they feel comfortable, they're able to move on to the similar meanings activities, which is the second activities, the first of our multiple choice activities. And this is kind of similar to a synonym activity here, but we're looking at providing your students with 3 different words that act as synonyms for the word, and one that very clearly does not. Frequently it'll be an antonym, but sometimes it's just very disconnected in here. And the goal is to build connections with words that your students may already know. So, for example, mitigate right here, I see relieve, diminish, and ease are all near synonyms. They're all words that mean very similar, and kind of your students should have some familiarity able to build that connection with. While aggravate here is not a synonym. So here we can see these 3 words are good connections and one is a bad connection. So we're really trying to build that web of words of what your students may already know as they move through here. Go ahead and click through each of these activities and move on to the next one. So we're moving out of our practice activities, again, getting feedback all along the way, into our show activities. Show begins to use these words in different contexts. So now we find the sentence, the doctor gave the patient medicine to alleviate the pain. Well, that sounds like he's mitigating pain. So we're looking for the word as kind of a synonym to a word in the sentence. You're building connections outside of just pure memorization of vocabulary definitions. We're trying to make sure your students learn how the words are used, how they can build connections. Again, I'll just click through at random. I'm submitting all my answers and moving along to our next activity. So our next activity is a fill in the blank activity. This activity, hopefully you got seeing this correctly. Okay, there we go. Is a fill in the blank where we provide the context for the word. So your students are able to see the words being used in context. Now we're getting closer and closer to actual use, but we're not expecting your students to use the words until the next activity. So now we need to find a context that completes the sentence that demonstrates we have an understanding of the meaning. So blank, Terrence gave his parents an equivocal response. So because he was always honest with them, did he give them an equivocal response? No, that's the opposite meaning. Since he did not understand their question, not quite the exact meaning. To avoid explaining where he'd been, or due to his intense anger. So the one that most clearly defines how that word works is to avoid explaining where he's been. He's been equivocating on this. So we're building those connections of meaning beyond just the simple activity of matching definitions. So we're really trying to build a variety of different connections as we move through here. So again, just clicking and randomly as we move through here. See why I had a 50% grade in my class here. And we'll move here to look at our next activity is apply. Apply is where it starts to get a little bit more difficult. So first off, we get a paragraph using these words in context. So now we're going to have to actually type these words out in order to move on. We'll have to find the words above. We'll also may need to conjugate the verbs if there's a verb in here. We try not to make kind of more advanced changes that come into the words, but you will have to kind of make the words fit correctly into context, and you'll have to spell them correctly. Having your fingers type those words out is a very different mindset than it is to just click on the correct answers as you move through here. So we really think that that's important to log them in, even though it is a little bit more difficult for the students and there's more opportunity for them to make a little typo to fix it. In an effort to mitigate costs, the Lockwoods asked their neighbor Bob for advice about installing a new roof on their house. Bob, a carpenter, warned them not to let a contractor, gull them into paying for something they didn't need. The existing roof only needed a simple repair, Bob said, and there was no need for the Lockwoods to deplete their savings for unnecessary construction. He knew that the contractors were untrustworthy, using chicanery to convince homeowners to spend more than necessary and drawing up uh, equivocal estimates to cheat clients. Here you see I misspelled something, so I'll go ahead and have to correct that one. And when I submit my answers, hopefully I typed everything correctly and get my correct answers in here. There we go. Now I can move on to word use. So our final activity goes ahead and asks students to go ahead and check off the correct answers for every time the word is used correctly. Sometimes it will only be done once, sometimes it will be done multiple times. This tends to be one of the more difficult activities for students, since they're familiar with multiple choice questions and they usually just look for one correct answer. Well, this could be all four correct. So you need to take your time, slow down. That's why we put it at the end. Students are usually trying to rush to get to their answers complete. We want to make sure that we're slowing them down so they're thinking about their activities as they close this out. So the team's equivocal performance gave their fans little to cheer about. Not quite the exact answer to work on here. The driver gave Tara a frustratingly equivocal response when she asked about the package. Instead of the usual equivocal statement, the witness gave clear, thoughtful answers, and Wanda's equivocal answers gave her friends all the information they needed. You can see in every sense the word is able to fit in here, but only two of those answers show you that they demonstrate the actual understanding of your vocabulary words as we move through here. Again, I'm just going to click at random in here. But you'll see that this is kind of a program that's a little bit different type of activity than what your students may be familiar with. It really makes you take time to understand the denotative, connotative meanings and how these words are used in actual context. And again, your students are opportunities to try this again and again. They tend to take this one a little bit difficult because it is more challenging to figure out whether the meaning of the vocabulary word really matches here. And there's so many different opportunities. So again, for the students that just like to click, click, click and get to the end, this particular program and this particular activity goes ahead and works from that particular space. And then your students are able to move on to the next activity. So in about 10, 15 minutes, maybe it takes a little bit more than 15 minutes, but about 20 minutes, your students are able to work through a program, learn a little bit about that background, and go ahead and answer vocabulary words and improve. When they get to the quiz at the end of the unit, that's a very direct 15-question quiz that includes multiple choice questions for the the matching the definition with the vocabulary word that they've encountered, and then 5 synonym questions and 5 antonym questions. So it doesn't have quite the same depth, but your students have been practicing all along to understand, not just being able to target that individual meaning and just be able to match a specific word to it, although the assessment does build to that point. Every unit has 21 lessons. We have this program currently available for grades 9 through 12. We may be moving down into lower grade levels in the future. That's not currently available at the immediate moment, but if anyone's interested in 7th or 8th grade programs, we can go ahead and talk about those in the future. So just to dive back into a couple of more common questions when you go ahead and take a look at our program. People are often ask us questions about the pricing. We build the pricing around school usage. It's only available within schools, and the pricing is variable dependent upon the total number of students that are in your classrooms. So it can vary from $12.99 a student down to $8.99 per student as you move through the program, and I'd be happy to build up a quote for anyone that is interested in that. So our kind of next step as we take a look at this, like I said, anyone who is interested in seeing a trial of the program can send me some details within the Q&A program. The questions are in chats. I'll go ahead and answer those questions, or I'll just reach out to you via email after the webinar is done in just a few moments, and I'll create a trial account for anyone who's interested. That trial, all I need is your email address, any grade levels that you're interested in taking a look at, and I'll send that to you here. From there, we can provide a quote based on your number of users, and all I'll need is the administrator for the school. Our school setup, I mentioned at the beginning, really our goal was to try to limit the amount of time that you spend on that. We have a very flat kind of import process where we get a simple list of your courses, grades, and teachers. We'll go ahead and import those for you. We can do those at the beginning of the year. Some schools go ahead and change things dramatically at mid-year. If you have kind of multiple groups in there, we go ahead and help you out with that over the course of the year. It usually only takes a little bit of time to go ahead and get that set up. When those students are imported, you're ready to get started. There's not a whole lot of additional classroom activity. You're able to go in as a teacher, log in, see the grades, see the student performance as you move through here. So that is my quick little 25-minute walkthrough of the online program. I hope I was able to answer most of your questions. I'm going to go ahead and pop over into chat and see if anybody has any questions that I can answer in here. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and reach out to you via email. If you're watching a recording of this program later, please feel free to reach out to me at keith@prestwickhouse.com, and I will be happy to create a demo account for you, answer any questions, give you a live walkthrough, and give you a couple, give you any more details that you'd like to take a look at. I'm always happy to talk with teachers and see what I can do to help them out in their classrooms. So thank you so much for your time this morning or early afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. I hope that this has been helpful and I've been able to answer your questions. Thanks. I see that the Zoom chat is currently not working in here. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and feel free to use the Q&A function that exists in here. It works just like the chat function. All right. Well, I thank you for taking the time to meet with me today. I hope I've been able to answer any questions that come up. Again, my email address is keith@prestwickhouse.com, and I'd be happy to speak with anyone who's interested in learning more about the program. Thank you so much for your time and have a great day.